going to be looking through a clinical lens at Ye. As a sufferer of a disorder, I have had a lot of first-hand experience of.
Based. This guy already has started breaking this down really well. I'm impressed. Growing up, my dad had bipolar disorder. I remember he came to my brother's high school graduation and we went out to dinner. He took apart my brother's cell phone. He took the battery out. And my brother's like, why did you do that? He's like, because the government is tracking me. I guarantee if you're enabling him, his children are going to be resentful. Not only of him, but even more so than him, they're going to be resentful of the ones who enabled him.
Over the month of October 2022, Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, held the collective attention of online America with a series of controversial posts and statements about Jewish people which ran the gamut from veiled threats to highly personalized conspiracy theories. In November, as I was editing this vid, things got even weirder when Ye announced his upcoming presidential bid would be managed by Milo Yiannopoulos, a dogmatic ideologue who was exiled from the Republican Party in 2017 for endorsing child abuse, and Ye was subsequently seen attending Mar-a-Lago with Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist with a cult-like online following, whose agenda is to push America to the far right on issues like gender roles and interracial marriage. It's far from being the first time that Ye has been the thing everyone is talking about. It seems like every year there is some new quote, some media stunt, some bizarre escapade that demands our immediate attention, and we get swept away in conjecture. There is sycophantic praise, vicious scorn, eyebrow-raising bewilderment, and the picking apart of every detail of Ye's public and private life in an attempt to make some sense of what he might be getting at. Everyone has their own way of rationalizing what they're seeing. Some people think that Ye is commercially minded and generates controversy on purpose to appeal to untapped audiences. Other people think that Ye is a courageous free thinker who is strategically dismantling the powers that be. Some people think Ye is purely ego-driven and bitter from his wife leaving him. Whilst multiple interpretations of Ye's behavior may have a grain of truth to them, I feel like there's an elephant in the room that no one wants to address head-on, even though it's staring at us all the time in every Instagram outburst, in every TV interview, and through every tweet storm. In 2016, a member of my immediate family, someone I love a lot, started acting in ways that were strangely similar to Ye. There were outbursts, accusations, conspiracy theories, all of which came seemingly out of nowhere. Within a year, that member of my family was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, the same illness Ye received a diagnosis for in 2016. Ever since then, I observed this guy and I can't help but feel we're watching a hypermanic episode unraveling in real time. Ye's illness feels to me like the missing puzzle piece that explains all of his bizarre behavior, but nobody seems to want to dig into it or confront it head on. So obviously, I'm gonna do it. The point of this vid is not to use Ye's bipolar diagnosis to excuse the things he said, but neither will it be about condemning him as a person. Instead, I'm going to be looking through a clinical lens at Ye. As a sufferer of a disorder, I have had a lot of first-hand experience of.
Based. So I keep seeing the same tweets over and over again on Twitter, right? On Twitter, I keep seeing the same tweets over and over again about mental illness. Here, let me pull one up. Here it is. So this tweet here is, I have a friend with bipolar disorder I've known 15 years, and when he gets manic, he stays up really late, memorize song lyrics, and every so often he'll call demanding I play him at FIFA immediately, but he somehow manages to never hand it to Hitler. So I don't know what about this excuse for Ye. So this is nice and all that you have a friend whose bipolar disorder only manifests in that super mild way for you. The one I don't like is everyone saying he's schizophrenic based entirely on random stuff they've heard about the disorder. Yeah. It's great. It's great for this guy that his friend and anybody he knows with bipolar disorder, they just have only this to deal with. But for a lot of people, and I'm not saying this is to excuse people's behavior, but if you know somebody with bipolar, for some people, because they start to have delusional thinking, they become susceptible to conspiracies. They think delusional things. And obviously, it still doesn't excuse behaviors, but I think it's just something to really keep in mind. It can manifest in other forms, yeah. My friend's mom left behind her whole family and moved to the other side of the country during a manic episode. Yeah, crazy things happen. To say that, anti-Semitism, bigotry, racism can't be caused by mental illness is not true. Those things can exist without mental illness, but mental illness can certainly cause and exacerbate them. And they can continue to hold those bigoted beliefs even afterwards, right?
Explaining how his symptoms manifest themselves, and ultimately we'll be unpacking the unusual situation that's created when a person with one of the most complex mental disorders in medicine also happens to be the most interviewed person in America.
It must be really heartbreaking for his family.
One of the things that makes Ye a unique person to listen to in speeches, interviews, and performances is that he expresses things extremely passionately in a breathless, entranced style. Words come out super fast in this unstoppable onslaught of anecdotes and non sequiturs.
My friends will text me or write me emails and say, he did this. Some of them Obama did too, you know? But it wasn't, it's loud and stuff. Wow, the room is quiet in here. The room is quiet now and stuff. So
Ye appears to have so much energy when he speaks that it's a challenge for him to actually stop and give other people in the conversation a chance to respond.
But as far as Meek Mills, Puff Daddy, whoever, none of these, all you fake hard, you. Hold on. Okay. All you fake hard, you.
Everyone on Twitter thinks they're qualified to diagnose someone with 100% certainty. I'm not saying that. Kanye has a history of being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He himself has talked about it. So.
You know what I'm saying? I don't give a because you can't shoot nobody anyway, and the reason why you got to talk is because you did a deal, you fed.
But the most noticeable thing that sets Ye apart from other speakers is the abstract way in which he threads concepts together. This clip of Ye talking at the Oval Office begins on the subject of his deal with Adidas.
I mean, this Adidas thing made me a billionaire, and I could have lost $200 million walking away from that deal, but even with that, I knew it was more important for me to take the chance of walking away from that deal than to have no fathers in Chicago with no homes.
By the end of his sentence, Ye switches the topic of conversation to fatherless homes in Chicago, referring to the fact that his Adidas deal revolved around them having a production facility there. In the next 5 sentences after this, Ye switches topics multiple times, and I'll note these transitions on the screen as they happen.
No fathers in Chicago with no homes, and when we do have prison reprobation, because it's rehabilitation now.
This guy already has started breaking this down really well. I'm impressed.
Rehabilitation, because we didn't have the abilities in the first place. We never had anyone that taught us, we didn't teach us. Exactly, we had no one that taught us, right? So it's more important than any specific deal, anything that we bring jobs into America and that we provide a transition with mental health and the American education curriculum that Jim has worked on.
In the space of 30 seconds, we go from fatherless homes, to prison reformation, to people's abilities, back to fatherless homes, back to the Adidas deal, forward to bringing jobs to America, and then another jump to mental health in schools. Although each sentence that Ye says makes sense, there is something very odd about the way they are threaded together and the lack of closure Ye gives to each idea.
God, this dude's fucking based as fuck. Holy shit. This guy is so fucking based. As somebody who's dealt with a lot of people with mental illnesses, this guy has broken it down. What a fucking based king. Holy shit. Who are you? I love you.
For example, when he transitions from talking about his Adidas deal to fatherless homes, you would logically expect the next thing he says to be some sort of concluding statement that explains that connection he's just drawn. So he might say, so part of my deal involved putting a manufacturing base there, creating job security for families so fewer fathers ended up walking away from their kids. Now, the link between his deal and fatherlessness in Chicago is explained. That's the kind of detail we need. But instead of that, while the flow of his speech makes it seem like he's gonna elaborate on that point, he immediately jumps topics to prison reformation. There are other bits of disrupted language that make Ye's ideas difficult to parse. For example, he introduces the topic of prison reformation with a future clause, saying, when we do have prison reformation. So you're like, oh, he's about to say what the world's gonna be like when prisons get reformed. But then he discards the setup and starts talking about the difference between rehabilitation and habilitation, all without breaking the flow of his cadence, or clearly signaling, nah, I want to talk about this instead. So your brain is still expecting to hear the end of that future clause, but that's gone now. And Ye is on a completely different tangent, doing an impression of an older black guy.
Exactly, we had no one to tout us.
It gives you whiplash as a listener because you keep expecting the next thing Ye says to give closure to the last thing, but it never does.
There's a lot of things affecting our mental health that makes us do crazy things that puts us back into that trap door called the 13th Amendment. I did say abolish with the hat on because why would you keep something around that's a trap door? If you're building a floor, the Constitution is the base of our industry, right? Of our country, of our company. Would you build a trap door that if you mess up and you accidentally something happens, you fall and you end up next to the Unabomber? You gotta remove all that trap door out of the relationship. The four gentlemen that wrote the 13th Amendment, and I think the way the universe works, it's perfect. We don't have 13 floors, do we?
All of this is disarming because usually when you're listening to people, you don't know exactly what they're gonna say.
Oh my god, this guy is so fucking based. He broke it down so fucking well. He's broken it down so well. Just that one thing.
But the discourse markers they use allow you to reliably predict what kind of information they're gonna give you next. Whereas
I'm sending Star $70,000 in cold hard cash for Christmas. Please do. I wish. Please consider subscribing and super chatting. I will greatly appreciate it.
with Ye, it's like every new sentence is an entirely new train of thought rattling out of a machine gun, resulting in dialogue which feels disarming and surreal. People have various ways of interpreting Ye's monologues. To some, it shows Ye's spirituality. He's a man who speaks in spiritual terms because he has reconnected with God and has untapped spiritual intelligence that works in a different way to conventional intelligence. To others, Ye speaks symbolically instead of literally by choice. He speaks in an unconventional way so that he can convey deeper meanings. Some people say that Ye's way of expressing himself is just what genius looks like. If any of us were on Ye's level in terms of vision and creativity, we would talk like that. Let's not be afraid to say this out loud. All of these people are wrong. There are a few clinical terms to describe Ye's way of speaking, and the first we're going to talk about is pressured speech. This is a symptom of the manic phase of bipolar disorder, which can be understood as a compelling, virtually irresistible desire to talk.
Y'all probably saying, oh, she anxious to be on TV, which I am. I'm happy because I'm on TV. I always wanted to be on TV on Channel 9. No, Channel 11, because I wake up in the morning, and I take them to my school. I always had this program about Speak Up America. Yeah. And I said, oh, man, I'm going to write there. I can do that.
They will be extremely talkative, physically active. It's sometimes impossible to interrupt a manic in a talk. They have what we will call a push of speech, meaning that they talk so rapidly that it is almost impossible and sometimes impossible to interrupt, and they may not be able to stop.
Hold on, bro. I'm on a wave right here.
Okay, all right.
You talk every day.
All right.
Pressured speech does not simply mean someone
Holy
being
shit.
talkative. It's more like when someone has an inability to not share what is in their head. A thought enters their brain, and within the blink of an eye, it's coming out their mouth without them ever having that vital millisecond of reflection to decide whether or not they want to say it and how they want to articulate it. You notice that Ye sometimes doesn't actually have the language he needs to finish expressing a thought. His brain is already moving on to the next one. So when he can't think of a way to express something, he just steamrolls through using ad-libs.
You saw the North Korea, but people denounce that. And you say, you said this thing, you put this whole thing. People love to say all, every, blah, blah, blah. It's not that.
At first look, you might think this patient was on speed or amphetamines because she seems so high and so hyper, but in fact, we know that she's not on drugs and did a drug screen. She's really high on manic depressive illness, on the manic phase, almost as though there's a little tiny syringe of amphetamine that's going off in her brain all the time, putting her up, giving her this elevated mood.
The reason why Ye can often give the impression of being on drugs like cocaine or amphetamines during public appearances is that pressured speech is not just something that affects bipolar people. It's also a side effect of taking certain drugs. The way that someone who's on cocaine will talk your ear off in a nightclub, just bombarding you with their stupid thoughts and opinions at relentless pace, is essentially driven by the same brain signals that bipolar people experience during a manic episode. There are other parallels with drug experiences too, like the fact that bipolar mania brings with it a sense of euphoria, of being invincible with sensory perceptions like vision, sound.
Yeah, and the whole euphoria and invincibility thing is not something that is completely unfamiliar with Kanye's case either, right? Just today when we were looking at the Gavin McInnes, Nick Fuentes talk that Kanye had, or Ye, my apologies, he talked about how after getting debanked and getting removed from all these platforms, he feels stronger than ever. He feels like he can't be taken down.
Sound, touch, and taste being elevated.
They can become euphoric. They can become so excited about the possibilities in themselves, in their world, that nothing seems impossible.
A bipolar person might also manifest paradoxical laughter, which is inappropriate for the situation they're in. The kind of behavior you might expect to see from people on acid or shrooms.
Let me go to the next furore, which has been around you in the last couple of weeks, which is your attacks.
Is that British for theory? Is that British for theory? What's theory, bro? Is that British for theory?
You actually have quite a good British accent. That's quite good. Let me ask you, if I can, about the allegations that you have made anti-Semitic comments, and in particular, when you said on Instagram, I'm a bit sleepy.
What happened when I was 17? I was committed to a mental institution. It was a bummer.
The big difference, of course, is that a person who's on stimulants or psychedelic drugs will return to normal in a matter of hours, whereas a manic bipolar person experiences these symptoms for days, nights, weeks, and all that time their brain is firing off signals to say this, say that, do these things on impulse. I know from first-hand experience how difficult it is to be a carer for someone going through it, the nights of no sleep, the bizarre scenarios you find yourself in. I can only imagine how difficult it must be living it.
And just imagine his children watching it and not being able to do anything about it.
Separate from pressured speech, but closely connected, flight of ideas is a term which describes the phenomenon of someone's mind rapidly shifting from one topic to the next, conjuring up extraneous detail which is not relevant to the main point of the conversation.
The thoughts are disconnected, and when a person speaks, there's either a great deal of tangential, circumstantial, rambling kinds of lack of connectedness of one thought to the other.
Research papers point to the theory that mental disorders like bipolar and schizophrenia do something to the semantic network in the brain. This is the mechanism by which our brain categorizes different concepts and identifies connections between them. For example, if a friend tells you, "I've just heard an amazing record," your semantic network enables you to associate the word record with music and physical vinyls that play music and platforms where people listen to music and your favorite artists and songs.
Gringo says, "Oh God, I hadn't even thought of that. I'd be crying every night if one of my parents was like this." So yeah, it's really sad. I think it's especially sad. So like growing up, my dad had bipolar disorder and he stopped taking his medication, and there was nothing anybody in the family could do. He was, he's an adult, and you can't really force somebody to take their medication. You can't force somebody to get treatment. If they decide to stop, they stop. And so there's nothing you can do, and you have to continue to watch them like spiral more and more into mental illness. See where they go from there, what their life turns into. Phone calls and visits get less and less. When there are phone calls, it's like incredibly delusional things that they ask you. And you can only watch. You have no effect over it. It's completely out of your hands. There's nothing you can do except watch as like this like ship crashes and burns. And I can only imagine with my dad it was like partly public. There were, you know, public outbursts he'd have occasionally, you know, everybody knew about him. It was a very humiliating experience, you know, everybody knew, and whenever he was in a public place he would make a scene. But I can only imagine Kanye West is one of the most viewed people in the world. I can only imagine the amount of humiliation, the amount of hurt that his children are going through. So.
And your friends' favorite artists and songs, and the music you both enjoy together and frequently discuss. It's also essential to conversations that you are able to prioritize information. If a friend tells you they heard an amazing record, you can already assume the most likely place this conversation is going to go is here. They want to share music with you and discuss it, so you'll need to draw upon your shared experience of music that you have with this specific person. All of these things together enable you to engage your friend in conversation in a normal, human way, addressing the points they bring up and also inputting relevant ones of your own. Now, research papers theorize that what disorders like bipolar and schizophrenia do is overactivate the semantic network so that more concepts are being conjured up in the brain than is actually necessary for the conversation. It therefore becomes harder to suppress the topic areas which are not relevant, leading to a tendency to go off on illogical tangents. So let's go back to our example. Imagine that now, when your friend tells you they've just heard an amazing record, this does not just trigger thoughts about music, but also world records, like who can run the fastest, who can eat the most food, who has the highest net worth, records in terms of record keeping. Maybe you record things in your
And by the way, when you see somebody's mental health declining and deteriorating, I've had multiple family members and multiple people in my life I've seen have this issue with bipolar. And you know what's the worst is when you are watching their mental state deteriorate, and each day you see it getting worse, and you try to walk them through it, you try to get them help, and then like one day you don't even hear from them anymore. You know, you spend like every day, like 3 hours every day on the phone with them, trying to walk through things with them, trying to talk through things with them, and then as it's declining and declining and declining, the most terrifying part is when you have 24 hours where that person, after spending every day 3 hours every day with you on the phone for 24 hours, you don't hear anything from them and you don't know where they are. So and it's very frightening, you know. And then you'll find out maybe later, after that 24 hours, after contacting other people, that the person knows where they are, what they've done. So yeah.
Barry, when was the last time your accountants did an audit of your records? Recording. Is your voice being recorded right now? Remember the Watergate recordings? Do you like the taste of recorder lick? A recorder is a musical instrument that you played in nursery. You could play Three Blind Mice on the recorder right now if you had one. Your brain is being flooded with so many loosely associated but entirely irrelevant concepts. And so you lose the ability to properly engage with the thread of the conversation. You will pick concepts at random from this giant smorgasbord in your mind, and you will say sentences that are surreal and fragmented. Watch this exchange between Ye and Lex Fridman.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
You put Steve above like Elon's of the world. He's a designer and engineer, but he's a visionary in the design space.
Well, I would lean to him because I'm not an engineer, right? So I'm more like...
Then you're an engineer. If Steve is an engineer, you're an engineer. Essentially.
Ye is asked whether he sees himself as similar to Steve Jobs, given that Steve Jobs was a visionary in the design space. Listen to how Ye responds.
He's a cultural engineer. Like the people who run the emotions of the world and run the world off of people's emotions right now are social engineers.
Immediately departing from the subject of design engineers, Ye responds on a tangent about social engineering.
And social engineering is so important. Like
city design. There's a fancier word for that.
From social engineering, we pivot towards civic engineering, the way cities are planned and built.
But I was...
I would just like to also draw attention to the fact you can see this hoodie. I don't know what it's covered. I think it's covered in paint or something. I think we see him wearing this hoodie in 2 different occasions. It's the same hoodie covered in whatever it is. So I don't know how well he's taking care of himself.
I was in Oxnard last night to see Anthony Jeselnik.
From the way that cities are planned and built, we pivot to talking about a specific city in California called Oxnard, where Ye saw the comedian Anthony Jeselnik.
And I gotta find out what his opening joke was, because I'm doing interviews and I'm thinking I'm funny. And I like that he just kept on saying 20-year anniversary. I've been doing this for 20 years. And his opening joke was so high level, I realized that I wasn't funny. I realized that this dude is a professional at what he does.
From Anthony Jeselnik's opening joke, we pivot to Ye's realization that he's not funny.
And so many things are subjective.
From Ye realizing he's not funny, we pivot to the topic of subjectivity.
I always talk about this. It's like, people are arguing like, is Emily Ratajkowski the hottest, person? And I'm like, that's such a subjective thing. But like, if you go and shoot 3-pointers with Steph Curry, it's not subjective.
I feel like dirty hoodie to not cleaning themselves is such a wild. I'm not saying that, Blue. I'm saying that there are 2 different interviews, days apart, that he shows up and he's wearing the same exact outfit too. He's rich enough to have enough outfits for 2 different interviews. And this is not just speculation. Ye himself has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he himself has talked about having bipolar disorder. I'm not talking about him like not cleaning himself or anything like that. I'm just saying that 2 different interviews, couple days apart, wearing the exact same outfit with a shirt that's like clearly not taken care of. I don't know. It doesn't seem the best. So.
Right. Or if you go and compare bank accounts with Elon, it's not subjective.
From subjective things, we pivot to non-subjective things, like the basketball player Steph Curry's 3-point record being the best of all time, or Elon Musk being the world's richest billionaire.
And another thing that's not subjective, porn.
What about it?
Dick size. It's not subjective. You can measure.
A recurrent sentiment I see being expressed by people who are admirers of Ye.
Salvo, thank you for becoming a sponsor. Oh my gosh, Salvo, thank you for the 5 memberships. Holy shit. Very kind of you.
Is that his words make sense if you actually pay attention and listen. Like, if you focus and you're intelligent enough to see the bigger picture, you'll actually find a lot of value and wisdom and insight in his monologues. I have not found this to be the case.
And thank you for becoming a member as well.
The more you listen to him, all that becomes clearer is the fact that he has a serious mental disorder. I don't disagree with any of the individual statements Ye makes. What Steve Jobs does is social engineering. Yeah, I guess. City design is important. True. Ye saw Anthony Jeselnik in Oxnard and found him funny. I don't doubt that. A lot of things are subjective. Agreed. A lot of things are not subjective. Agreed. However, it's the bigger picture of seeing all these ideas strung together that reveals the problem. Ye was asked whether he considered himself to be a design engineer like Steve Jobs, and he somehow rambled his way through a million different tangents to the eventual answer that everyone has a different sized penis. Indicative of a person who is experiencing flight of ideas, Ye is making loads of semantic connections that are loosely associated with one another, but completely...
Yeah, I have to say this video is super... This video is so good at explaining things. I really have to give this person credit.
Relevant to the main point of the question he was asked. His mind is so preoccupied with each new idea that appears that he fails to make a single coherent argument. Now I want to tackle a thornier question about Ye's illness, which is, to what extent does his bipolar disorder affect his beliefs? For example, the ones he has about Jewish people. I've seen opinions at both ends of this debate. There are people who suggest that Ye's disorder is an extenuating factor which absolves him of a lot of condemnation currently being thrown his way. Then, on the other hand, there are people who say that his bipolar disorder has nothing to do with the views he's expressing, that mental illness...
I've never watched his videos before, Isaac. I do really appreciate this.
and bigotry exist in isolation from one another and should not be conflated. I think the reality is actually incredibly messy. Bipolar disorder does not just affect the way a person acts, it also drastically impacts the way they think. Hallucinations and delusions are pretty common, affecting 60% of bipolar sufferers, and mental health professionals have documented.
So my dad had various delusions. He also did have the occasional hallucination, auditory hallucination.
It also drastically impacts the way they think. Hallucinations and delusions are...
He had auditory hallucinations from what I remember. My mom talked about how he kept hearing gunshots at night one night. And yeah, he had like extraordinary delusions. It was fucking crazy. And he still does. I remember he came to my brother's high school graduation. We went out to dinner. And during that, and it's really sad because it should have been a nice thing for my brother to celebrate graduating high school. We went out to dinner and he like took apart my brother's cell phone. He took the battery out. And my brother's like, "Why did you do that?" He's like, "Because the government is tracking me." And then he kept saying crazy things all night that would like get my brother upset. Yeah, it should have been a nice night for my brother. I feel so bad about it. So. But yeah, it really does change the way that these people think, you know?
Are pretty common, affecting 60% of bipolar sufferers, and mental health professionals have documented several categories that the delusions tend to fall into. One of the most prevalent types is grandiose delusions, which cause a person to believe they are more powerful, rich, smart.
Sometimes grandiose delusions involve religious beliefs. So that happened with my dad. He had like grandiose delusions about religion. I won't go into detail about it, but yeah, this is...
Are more talented than they really are.
What do you mean by Olympic abilities?
Olympic basketball skills. I know I got Olympic basketball skills. I'm better than Oscar Robertson.
I'm Paul, or I'm Yah.
Yah sounds like a god, just the name to me.
Yes. He's the greatest mind there's ever been, and mine is.
The difficulty of assessing delusions of grandeur when it comes to Ye is that he is an enormously rich and successful person who's achieved more than...
Yeah, Ye is, to be fair to him, is incredibly talented, incredibly smart, incredibly, like, a genius, right? Yeah. So there is that. So it's going to be hard.
More than most people could ever dream of in their lifetimes. So when he...
Fuck, I keep pausing it and then this keeps bugging out. I don't want to talk about it in detail, Dr. Zayas, but one day when I feel more comfortable about it, I'll talk about it.
I'm Paul.
It took me a long time to even talk about my dad. Like, even though he was something that was like in my life and that I had to deal with and watch completely like deteriorate and you know, I had to like lose him slowly. I don't think I really had conversations about him, like open conversations about him with my family until I was like 17 or 18. So yeah. Can you link the vid you're watching? Yeah.
Or I'm Yah.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a grandiose thing. Eddie Bombay, him saying his biggest regret is not watching himself perform live. I think you know, that's okay. Like, that's kind of like an artist perspective, but this is what makes it hard with Kanye because he is incredibly talented. He is somebody who's achieved a massive amount of success, right? But there may be some delusions of grandeur there, right?
Yah sounds like a god, just the name to me.
Yes. He's the greatest mind there's ever been, and mine is.
The difficulty of assessing delusions of grandeur when it comes to Ye is that he is an enormously rich and successful person who's achieved more than most people could ever dream of in their lifetimes. So when he says he is the best, the voice of a generation, a visionary, it's egotistical. But it's arguably true. Who else has managed to do what he's done? He is a peerless guy in the music industry and in fashion. However, I would argue that he also has implausible delusions that would be clinically diagnosable as symptoms of his disorder, and that these come out in statements that are clearly not linked to his achievements in culture.
I have ideas that can make
Like his whole thing, I'm an engineer thing, right?
the human race existence within our 100 years better.
I think God uses me for a time like this. He put me in this situation.
I am the visionary. I can end war.
I am fighting a battle in the spiritual form. I just so happen.
I just want you guys to know also, as somebody who's known plenty of people with bipolar disorder, had tons of loved ones and family members who have these mental illnesses, believing that there's like some divine force in you, believing that God has like sent you on a mission, is, you know, and that there you've got some divine force within you, that you might even be part God, is relatively common from what I've seen. That's just from what I've seen. I don't know if it's common across the disorder as a whole. So
Happen to be a bright part of God's army. They put me as the prophet.
Ye is undeniably a hugely important and influential person, but he's not the savior of the human race. His words can't change the material fabric of the universe we live in or end wars. That is the work of a religious deity, not someone who is good at making music and selling shoes. The same goes for Ye's engineering ideas.
Where I've got to with my research is that there will be a hole at the top that allows natural light, natural air, and there's a constant water system, so it becomes like a water city where it's a constant flow that's not, it's regenerative, it's not wasting the water, and it's just a constant flow. So I put the toilet really close to where this I don't want to call it a wave pool, but in the pool the water is not still.
So that exists in water, surrounded by water.
Well, the living room is you have two rooms. You have the dry room, which people would call the living room before, and then you have the wet room.
This is so common for people who are experiencing mania to feel like they've landed on an inspirational idea that will change society.
Well, this is the work I've been doing. You know,
Right.
this is really important, and it's my cure for cancer.
Okay.
That's what it is. You know, it's all written down here.
Have you ever had anything like this before in your life, where you felt full of energy and lots of bright ideas?
No,
It's
no,
not
but
happened
this has been
before.
going on for so long that I can't really remember anything else. You know.
But what they've actually written down, what they've actually got on paper, is nonsensical. This guy hasn't found the cure for cancer, and Ye hasn't stumbled upon an amazing engineering solution. He just thinks he has because of delusions of grandeur. But the delusion that we could point to as the driving force of Ye's recent controversies is paranoia. Paranoid or persecutory delusions cause a person to believe that other people are trying to hurt them without
despite having no proof that this is happening. Yeah. They may feel so threatened that they repeatedly call police seeking help. So none of the people that I've dealt with had the part where they call police, but the people I've dealt with have had the paranoid persecutory delusions, feel like everybody's out to get them. My dad taking apart my brother's phone at his high school graduation is just one thing. My dad felt like people would hide like truths from him, and so he would have to do things that were like you're not supposed to do to kind of access those truths, you know? So like one time we went to a restaurant. He'd taken us to a restaurant, and it was just me, my brother, and him. And there's clearly a clear entrance and exit. And then there's a door, you know, you'll see these normal, in the restaurant, random doors that, you know, aren't really for use. They're not really for use. And they're like locked or whatever. And so I remember in this one restaurant, he insisted on going out this door that nobody was using, that the restaurant did not have, the restaurant was not using as an entry and exit. And it was, you know, to the point he was making a scene in the restaurant. The restaurant owner didn't like it, but he knew it wasn't our fault. And he just, like, my dad eventually got his way and left out the wrong door that he wanted to go through because he felt like they were hiding something from him. So, it's weird. But yeah, there are a bunch of different things. Like, another person I know who had bipolar accused me of recording them and then made me film the entirety of my room to make sure that I wasn't recording them and I didn't have, like, FBI agents next to me and stuff. And I had to jump on a video call and prove to them, like, show my entire room, that there were no microphones being used and that there were no agents listening in and all that. There's no proof that there are no other people in that room right now, TBH. Now you're just generating paranoia in the audience. Oh boy.
Any logical indication that this is the case?
I was just so paranoid.
There's no convincing them either. It's really sad. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Did your dad ever get on medication? He did briefly, but then, as a lot of people with that illness do, they stop taking their medication. A lot of people with bipolar disorder stop taking their medication, and he never went back on it. I think he went on maybe once or twice and then just kept quitting his medication, and then just had to watch him, because there's nothing you can do when somebody's a grown adult. You can't force them to do anything. So I just had to, like, watch him deteriorate, and I had to watch him leave my life slowly. So yeah, and then I ended up doing the last cutting off my on my own. So I ended up doing the last cutting off on my own.
That people were trying to kill me, that people were after me, and when my husband came to talk to me, I just started hitting him and screaming, and I ran off to my room and hid, and I remember thinking, like, oh, all these people are after me, and then kind of like my rational brain would think, well, why are they after you?
I feel like we see a lot of bipolar people who think they don't need their medication. Is that common with bipolar people, or do we just notice it because it can be so disastrous when they're off meds? I think it is common that people feel like they don't want to take medication, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
And then I think, well, I don't know, but how can you be sure that they're not?
Ye uses incredibly violent language when describing the intentions of people he sees as his enemies.
My so-called friends / handlers around me, they said stuff like people get killed for wearing a hat like that. They threatened my life. They put my life. They basically said that I would be killed. You know, they moved us to one of the most agreed upon to be one of the most dangerous places in the world. It's almost like they tried to kill me or something.
Wow. This is really like the Malcolm X movie. They're really gonna send some black people to kill me.
If I go to somebody's block and somebody shoot at me, kill one of my homeboys, then it's they whole block. Now you get it?
Yeah.
Now you get it?
But for the record, nobody's killing Kanye. Everyone loves Kanye. Are we right? Everyone loves.
Ye doesn't say that people are going to ridicule him or cancel him or screw him over financially, but kill him. And given his current condition, it's not out of the question that he believes this in a literal sense. The same goes for the claim that his children were kidnapped by the Kardashians.
And the Kardashians kidnapped my daughter in public. And I didn't have the address of my child. This family kidnapped my kids in broad daylight. Shut the f up unless you was there when the Kardashians kidnapped my kids.
Having a birthday party and not inviting the dad is not the same thing as kidnapping a child. More recently, Ye aired a completely new conspiracy theory that the medication he was previously
I have a parent with schizophrenia. They regularly don't take their meds and I have to have them committed. It's really stressful. I'm sorry, Sensei Tumbleweed. I have, unfortunately, I have a lot of people I know in my life that have a lot of mental illnesses. So I have a family member who has schizophrenia as well, paranoid schizophrenia, and that can be very stressful, yeah, especially if they're like violent. It's really stressful. I'm so sorry to hear that.
previously taking to treat his condition may have been part of a plan to poison him.
They wanted to medicate me every day. You realize, like, they could have just switched to medication and I wouldn't be here. And on the news, they would have said it was because of a mental issue.
In the same interview, Ye claims that his mother, Donda, didn't just die. She was actually sacrificed by the powers that be in Hollywood in order to traumatize him.
You know, out in Hollywood, a lot of people come up missing. Feels like it might be a lot of that in order to control, traumatize. They can control me. My mom ain't here. My mama was sacrificed.
Me too.
You understand?
Yeah.
Personal story time. When my
Sacrificed. My mom was sacrificed. That's got to be like a sign of like a little bit of delusional thinking, right? Delusional thinking.
My family member with bipolar was going through their manic episodes, they were paranoid about loads of stuff. This included people serving them at the supermarket, cars they saw on the street, and random statements that came up in conversation. And these paranoias...
Yeah, random statements that come up in conversation too. That's something that is horrible. When you're talking to somebody who is paranoid about all of that, and you can say the most innocuous thing in a conversation, and then they'll ask you, what did you mean by that? And then they'll visit that one half sentence over and over again with you and try to like dig and needle and see like, oh, what did you really mean by it? Very sucks, you know?
Caused them to act in completely insane ways. They ended up spreading vicious rumors about the people who were closest to them. They had aggressive confrontations with me about things that had never actually happened. And they deliberately sought out the company of people who indulged their paranoid beliefs. So in the end, there was no one left to challenge them and say, look, you're imagining these things. I can't express how out of character all that behavior was for this family member of mine, who was, before their bipolar mania, the kindest, most rational and civic-minded person I know. This is why it's...
That's the worst part too. They can go from being like a completely opposite person to, you know, they can go from being completely sane, completely rational, one of the most rational people you talk to, the rock in your life. They can go from that to being completely unstable and unpredictable.
So messy trying to separate Ye's condition from his actions. To me, his condition is the core engine driving the actions. Admittedly, there are some specific features to Ye's bipolar that don't manifest in other people. The fixation on the Jews, the through line of Candace Owens' conservative talking points.
So yeah, the fixation on the Jews is definitely a weird one for Kanye. Though it's not uncommon for like people with mental illness to become unhealthily fixated on certain things, but yeah.
I have no doubt that these are beliefs Ye sincerely holds.
A lot of this is not unique to bipolar, so you can't take this bucket as symptoms as a direct indicator, i.e. you would see people with BPD, schizophrenia, etc. act similarly. Yeah, that's true, Bosset. And you can look at this and just be like, you know, these are indicators of clearly somebody who's mentally unwell, right? I wouldn't ever encourage people to like make a diagnosis. You know, none of us are qualified to be making that diagnosis, but you know, there are clear signs of somebody being mentally unwell that you can look at. And when you've known enough people who have mental unwellness, to other people it looks normal. To other people it's like, oh, that's not necessarily a sign. Once you've known several people who have these common signs of like mental illness, you start to be able to identify when somebody needs to be hospitalized or when somebody is going to need to be hospitalized, right? That's the thing though. Like that's the thing when you have people who come into these things and say like, oh, that's not really a sign. When you have maybe known one or two people who've gone through it, you're going to be a little bit less likely to be able to tell, right? If you've seen at least two people, 2 to 3 people, I think, mentally deteriorate, I think you're better at telling the signs when somebody is really like mentally unwell. Because to a lot of people, it just looks like normal stuff. Or it just looks like, oh, they're having a bad day. Or, you know, so, yeah.
Bipolar or not, but it's Ye's mania that elevates them from being the kind of thoughts one might mull over in their head to Ye declaring spiritual warfare that he believes God has sent him to planet Earth to fight.
You know, God builds warriors in a different way. He made me for such a time like
There's
this.
This thing. Somebody had said to me earlier, oh, well, a lot of people feel like God's given them a purpose. There's a difference between God's given you a purpose, like passively, and you thinking that you're God's warrior, here to change the world, that you have like the gift of divineness from God himself delivered to you, living inside you, and that you're here to change the future and change the entire world, right? There's that is a different level of delusion.
Yes.
Can I just take you back a step?
Yeah,
You
sure.
said God tells you.
God tells me.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, he tells me. He just talks to me.
Whether or not you think it absolves Ye of blame for the narrow-minded beliefs he's been preaching recently, there is a meaningful distinction between someone who is able to keep those thoughts in their head or articulate them in a careful, consistent...
This is another thing that I want to say, is that there are a lot of anti-Semitic people, a lot of bigoted people in the world, but one of the clearest things that makes me think 100% Kanye is unwell is nobody in their right mind would be saying the shit that he's saying out loud. Even a normal anti-Semitic person who's generally mentally sane would not be putting themselves at the risk that he is, destroying his reputation, destroying whatever he could have left for his children, getting himself debanked, and then acting like he's invincible. Acting like he's invincible. Nobody who is mentally well would be voicing these things out loud. Even you look at like I've talked to people who are clearly bigoted, who are not this mentally ill, right? And they don't do this. They would never take risks like this. They know better. So this is like, not only is it that he's got these delusions in his head, but he is saying things out loud in a way that is going to put him at risk, put his finances at risk, put anything he has in the future that he was going to leave for his children at risk, putting his family at risk, his family's reputation at risk, right? And his children. He doesn't even think about how his children are probably watching him every day, watching every antic that he goes through and being heartbroken every day. I will tell you, as the child of somebody who had to watch like their father in a very public way mentally deteriorate, and I couldn't do anything about it, and it was almost like a taboo subject in a way, while it was still happening very publicly in front of everybody. It is heartbreaking. And like it damages you, you know, like you somebody who should have been like a parent to you is somebody that you know you can never rely on.
Way versus someone whose mouth is an open door to their brain. Something which complicates everything a bit more is the fact that Ye, who in 2019 was acknowledging his bipolar disorder and explaining all the ways it affected him, now claims he never actually had.
His children are all still very young too. They probably don't fully understand what's going on. Yeah, so when my dad started deteriorating, I think I was like 6 or 7, was when the first, well, I mean, no, we saw signs before that. He was always unpredictable, and we never felt safe with him. But I think things became evident that he was really unwell when I was around 8. And even then, though I didn't understand it fully, it was still a very hard process to go through. And the fact is that you continue to watch this person over years. It's not something that happens like quickly. It's something that you watch happen over years. As they slowly deteriorate more and more, they show up unexpectedly at school and workplaces. They call unexpectedly at school and workplaces. They'll maybe move around unexpectedly. You'll see them not taking care of themselves. Yeah, it's very frightening. And so his children are probably heartbroken and frightened, and as they get older, they will probably resent him for it, if they don't already. Some part of them probably already does resent him a little bit. And they won't want a relationship with him. And that's why I'm saying nobody in their right mind would put their children through this, you know, would make their children not want to be in contact with them and all of that, right? Thank you for the gifted sub, Oli Peachy. Well, they're gonna resent him regardless when they get older. Because I resented my dad when I was older. Well, when I started to understand it, I started to resent him. I started to get really mad with him. And then by proxy, I got mad at people who enabled him. I was even more mad at people who enabled him, actually. And yeah, they will resent him. And my dad, like, things happen publicly, but again, my dad is not Kanye West. Kanye West is one of the most viewed people in the world. So
He had bipolar disorder, that he was just suffering from exhaustion and was misdiagnosed on purpose by a Jewish doctor.
The thing about the red hat that drove me,
he never actually had. Something which complicates everything a bit more is the fact that Ye, who in 2019 was acknowledging his bipolar disorder and explaining all the ways it affected him, now claims he never actually had bipolar disorder, that he was just suffering from exhaustion and was misdiagnosed on purpose by a Jewish doctor.
the thing about the red hat that drove me to a point of exhaustion, which was misdiagnosed by a, I'm not going to say what race, what people, doctor, and what hospital, and what media went.
Fox News fan 87. This entire stream, since I've started watching this video, I have not insulted the right. I have not insulted the left at all. Okay? If you want to come in here and spew bullshit, at least get it right. I don't fucking blame shit like this on the left or the right. Don't fucking do it with me. You will find that I'm one of the most approachable people in I know, fail fucking troll, right? I'm one of the most approachable people within the political sphere. I will literally talk to anybody. So you can shut your fucking mouth, okay?
We know I can't say that. It was a Jewish doctor.
So do you believe that you have any form of mental illness?
I believe that I suffered from exhaustion. I suffered from being lied to constantly by the people around me. And I believe those things can drive anyone to a point
Yeah, he thinks everybody around him is lying to him too.
of maximum exhaustion.
Now, exhaustion alone doesn't typically make a person run around newsrooms in a state of manic euphoria and lose control of their semantic networks, but mania certainly does those things, as well as making it very difficult for bipolar people to go to sleep.
How's your sleep? Well, I wanted to yell at somebody. I needed to yell at somebody, so.
Not a lot, but I don't really need it. It's not that that I feel tired. It's just that I don't feel like sleeping. You know?
Have you been sleeping at all?
No time to sleep.
No time to sleep.
no.
When was the last time you had a good night's sleep, would you say?
Don't need it.
Don't
Don't
need
need
it.
So, this is important, guys. It's important to try and get a decent amount of sleep every night. And if you notice your sleep is not doing well, maybe keep an eye on it, and see, you know, there are comorbidities with bad sleep hygiene and mental illness. So it's something to keep an eye on. So.
Yeah, I've got this enthusiasm from God.
Additionally, as any mental health worker will tell you, a manic bipolar person claiming they've been wrongly diagnosed by doctors is nothing new. It's a tale as old as time, the oldest trick in the manic bipolar playbook.
Who's told you you've got bipolar, Paul?
Every psychiatrist that I've met, I've been labeled as being something that I'm nowhere near. My so-called bipolar disorder doesn't exist.
And are you concerned about your behavior?
No.
Or you feel good?
I feel fantastic. It's not really any reason why I should be here as far as I'm concerned. I mostly came out of the courtesy. I feel really fantastic. So it's not really a medical thing.
And you know how you were saying that your mate at work said that you were...
Esker says, Stardust, I came here from the Tipster raid, but I'm probably going to sub. You seem really cool, Stardust. Hey, thanks. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I cover news, politics, drama, a lot of drama. I have recently really been zoning in on the stuff happening with Ye. I like to talk to people across the political aisle. It's fun stuff, and people like to yell at me, and I like to yell back. So, yeah.
You were...
Who, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said rude things.
But it sounded like he thought you weren't very well at the moment.
No, I'm fine.
I guess, John, what I'm wondering is whether this might be a sign that you're not very well at the moment.
No, I'm fine. I want to talk about this. You seem to want to change the subject, so I don't want to talk to you anymore. I've had enough of you, and I've had enough of being out. I want to talk to somebody else. I want to talk to the boss. I want to talk to your boss. Where's your boss?
So why did Ye acknowledge his bipolar disorder 2 years ago and then start denying it recently?
That is true also, Lisa. A lot of bipolar people are very smart, yeah.
Well, bipolar sufferers are essentially...
They're very smart people, and usually very creative people. Like, my dad was like a math genius. So...
two different people. When they're in the low phase of the condition, they are typically more lucid, but also depressed, with a hazy fog clouding their mind that stops them from feeling things they're supposed to feel. Then, when they're in the high or manic stage, they're the opposite. They are experiencing a whole new spectrum of human emotion, like they're connected to the universe and everyone around them. But this is also the stage where the person is least rational, and they manifest the symptoms we've discussed: pressured speech, flight of ideas, psychosis, delusions. And it's very hard to convince someone during peak mania that they have a problem that needs to be treated. If you compare the recent appearances Ye has made on TV to the interview he did with David Letterman in 2019, it's like night and day.
When you ramp up, I ramp up and I go high. Like,
what does that mean when you ramp up? What is that? What are we talking
ramp
about?
is like when you're bipolar, if you don't take medication every day to keep you at a certain state, you have a potential to ramp up, and it could take you to a point where you could even end up in a hospital and you start acting erratic, as TMZ would put it. I feel a heightened connection with the universe when I'm ramping up. It expresses your personality more. you can become almost more adolescent in your expression or border into places. This is my specific experience that I've had over the past 2 years, because I've only been diagnosed for 2 years. When you're in this state, you're hyper paranoid about everything. Everyone now is an actor. You feel everyone wants to kill you. You pretty much don't trust anyone. Everything is a conspiracy. You see.
What an excellent couple of clips that he's spliced together here. This guy who made this video has really done an excellent job.
Everything. You feel the government is putting chips in your head. You feel you're being recorded. You feel all of these things.
And these are vividly realistic to you.
Yes.
It's as if Ye is prophetically describing exactly what we're seeing now in 2022. The paranoia, the belief that everyone around him is a dishonest actor, that everything is a conspiracy against him. This is why, for me, it is undeniable that Ye is currently undergoing a manic phase of his condition, something which, to take him at his word, he hasn't taken medication for since 2019.
I heard you recently, you said that you had been not on any sort of pharmaceutical medication for...
I just want to let you guys know also, there was that moment in time, maybe a year ago, where Kim and Kim's mom flew to Colorado, I think, to try and get Kanye to admit himself to a hospital because they knew something was wrong. They knew he was not doing well. I don't know if it was a year ago, maybe it was several months ago, actually. And a whole bunch of people tried to drag Kim and her mom, and a bunch of people who don't know people, like, there were a couple of comedians who came out and said, oh, you know, he seems fine, right? And that's fine. The average person is really hard at being able to determine when somebody is actually ill, when they're about to have that tipping point. But to somebody, probably to Kim in that moment, to Kim's mom in that moment, they knew that this is the tipping point. You know, and I've been in that situation too, where, you know, I've been on both sides where somebody's warned me, like, this person looks like they're going to tip, and I've been like, are you sure? Because I'm not seeing it. And then they tip. And then I've been also on the side where I'm watching somebody and I know that they're tipping and other people can't see it. And it's really hard. It's really hard to, you know, deal with that. And it's hard for the average person, you know, once you've seen people deteriorate like several times, you start to notice and figure out what it is. But, you know, and if you've seen several different people deteriorate several times too, you start to really notice. But to the average person, it's hard for them. It's hard for them to determine that. It's really hard for them to really tell that this person is going off the deep end. So.
Eight weeks, 8 months? What was it?
About 8 months.
8 months. So, do you run the risk of this coming back? Will you always have this, or is it episodic? Is it chronic?
That's exactly what it is. Like Snoop said, about to go to the next episode.
The good news is that bipolar disorder is treatable. Antipsychotic medications can level a person out so the swing...
It's so sad because you'll have people who will drag people in public who will be like, how could you do this? You're just trying to get them admitted for this, that, you know, whatever. And that's really not the case because they know that this is about to be a disaster. And like nobody else will take their word at it, you know? Unless you've seen people deteriorate several times, nobody will take... You know, nobody will understand it in that same way. So, that you do, you know?
Things they experience are less extreme.
Because for most people, until that person crosses the threshold, then they're like, oh, this person needs to be in the hospital. But once you've seen people deteriorate several, it's hard for me to explain, but there is a tipping point. There is the point right before where you can tell, you know?
It means they can still feel happy during their lows and remain stable during their highs. In the best case scenario, someone could...
And even when somebody has reached the deep end, even when somebody went over the deep end, a lot of the times for the average person who's not used to mental illness, they're not used to identifying that as mental illness.
take medication for a couple of months and find they never actually need it again, because it permanently calms their cycles down. The problem is that the time when you really need a person to take medication is when they're undergoing an extreme manic high, but that's also the time when they're least likely to perceive their behavior as a problem. They're pumped up on manic endorphins.
This is very true too. When somebody is, the time when they need to take it is when they're at that high point, and that's the least likely time that they're going to take it because they feel really, really good.
To take medication is when they're undergoing an extreme manic high, but that's also the time when they're least likely to perceive their behavior as a problem. They're pumped up on manic endorphins, and they are totally oblivious to the fact that the divine revelations they're having in their head and preaching to the world are just incoherent word salads. Of course, this is made even more difficult when the person in question is a billionaire surrounded by yes men, capable of firing or blackballing anyone who refuses to play along with the charade.
Is there somebody in your life close to you that you trust enough to call you out on your bullshit? We're all full of shit sometimes.
What's my bullshit? What was the bullshit?
Jewish media, Jewish...
That's not bullshit.
The
and
point
I said it. You're not gonna make me say it 800 more times.
I'm trying to call you out on your bullshit because I hope I'm somebody you can trust.
I
That's
don't
it.
fucking trust you.
I'd like to...
I do appreciate that Lex tried to challenge him. But yeah, I'm just gonna say, anybody who is enabling Kanye right now, I doubt any of the people who are enabling him would ever watch one of my things. But I guarantee, if you're enabling him, even his children are going to be resentful. Not only of him, but even more so than him, they're going to be resentful of the ones who enabled him. And that probably includes fans too. They probably will be incredibly, incredibly resentful and deeply angry with anybody who enabled his behavior. So.
Close off this vid by talking about what made me think I needed to address this topic in the first place. And it's that whilst I've been kind of fascinated but very dismayed to see Ye living out his hypermanic episodes in the spotlight of the national media, it's been equally perplexing to see a whole cast of characters emerge who believe, or at the very least pretend to believe, that Ye's neurodivergency is a source of profound insight and wisdom.
The enemies of his ideas dismissed West, as they have for years, as mentally ill. Too crazy to take seriously. Look away, ignore him. He's a mental patient. There's nothing to see here. That was not our conclusion.
Do you think Ye would resent them too, like if he ever snapped out of it? I don't know, Oli. I don't know. But I do know that I'll explain after this.
In fact, we've rarely heard a man speak so honestly and so movingly about what he believes.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. These, you guys, like, I'm telling you, like, his children are going to be, like, going to sleep at night wishing the worst upon you.
He is just in a very, very positive state. He's optimistic. He understands exactly what he's doing.
He's lucid and logical. He's saying he was nearly drugged out of his mind.
Lucid and logical.
Some of the crazy things he may have been saying
Lucid and logical. Can
you
you imagine? I would be infuriated. I would be wishing for people's deaths. Like, I'm not even kidding.
Of crazy drugs.
When you start expressing yourself freely without caring about what people think, they'll call you crazy.
He's not crazy. It's just the black community need to catch up with what he's actually doing. Some people saying that he's suffering from bipolar, or he ain't really. It's a lot of stuff that's really out there. You don't get to $2 billion and being crazy. It just.
They're enabling him. They don't understand. They don't know the level that his delusions are going. They think that, like, when he says that God's given him a purpose, they think that, like, he's saying it in the normal people way, not in the crazy people way, right?
It just don't work like that.
The Emperor's New Clothes is a Danish folktale about an emperor who is fooled into buying clothes that don't exist. He is told by swindlers that the clothes will appear invisible only to those who are simple of mind. He tries on the clothes that don't exist, and due to his hubris, when he looks in the mirror and sees himself naked, he doesn't want to admit it in case it confirms him as a dumb guy. Still unsure, however, he asks his servants in the room what they think, and humbled in the presence of the Emperor, they respond approvingly, saying how fabulous his non-existent clothes look. The Emperor then parades around the whole town butt naked, and in deference to him, every member of the townsfolk pretends to be enthralled by his non-existent drip. Apart from one kid at the very—
Why are you assuming? I'm not assuming it. That's generally what somebody, what people who are inexperienced with mentally ill people think. When they see a mentally ill person saying certain things, they phrase it in the way that they are thinking. They are not thinking like a mentally ill person.
very end of the story, who's like, that guy's naked. The tale of the Emperor's new clothes is about how people will disregard the evidence they see with their own eyes in deference to an authority figure who they are primed to look up to. Ye is a massive authority figure to a lot of people. He is a visionary artist, a successful entrepreneur, a renegade who pretty much does what he wants all the time, regardless of the consequences. The narrative of Ye being an unimpeachable prophet fighting a righteous battle against the establishment is an extremely appealing one to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. For Ye's fans, it's impossible to perceive his disjointed monologues as anything other than divine prophecy, because they steadfastly believe their favourite artist must have some pioneering vision for everything he does, just like on his albums. Conspiracy theorists tend to believe that people who say crazy things are telling the truth and people who say rational things are lying. So when conspiracy theorists observe someone acting like a manic bipolar sufferer, they think they're looking at the biggest truth-telling genius they've ever seen. And for political pundits, it is useful, at least for the time being, to indulge Ye's delusions and sane wash him to their audiences. It's advantageous both for fringe right-wing figures who can gain legitimacy by attaching themselves to him and feeding him talking points.
What a dig at Milo, by the way. Holy shit. He really went in. Fringe right-wing media figures who are trying to gain relevancy.
And also for mainstream Republican Party mouthpieces who can leverage Ye's celebrity status to manufacture consent for right-wing policy positions. Of course, all of this comes with the caveat that anyone using Ye for politics is playing a risky game, given that he may at any point decide to turn on people and start leaking DMs. As to the larger phenomenon of people who are not inherently political seeming to be enthralled by Ye's mania, I guess context is everything. There's a difference between seeing people voicing these fantasies to a psychiatrist versus an eccentric celebrity doing it in a well-lit TV studio or podcast space with pundits whose jobs revolve around driving engagement, regardless of the mental state of the person they're interviewing. We are primed as viewers to expect cryptic artistic wisdom, off-the-wall commentary, and self-indulgent monologues, which blinds us to the reality of what we're actually seeing. In this context, the line between a thought leader and someone with a thought disorder becomes quite a fine one. I have no idea where we go from here, but I do know that future students of American history are gonna be baffled when they dig through the archives and find footage of Ye having his hypermanic episode in the Oval Office. There is no better example of the Emperor having no clothes. Every single person in that room knows that something is wrong, that this is not a normal way for someone to behave or to communicate their ideas. But alas, the president thinks this is good publicity, so the person suffering from flight of ideas and pressured speech is heralded as an impressive orator.
And we're putting people in positions to have to do illegal things to end up in the cheapest factory ever, the prison system.
I'll tell you what, that was pretty impressive. You know, I hate to say this, Jim. Do you want to say something? What do you do after that?
Bipolar disorder should not be something that single-handedly defines a person. But Ye's refusal to take medication means that increasingly, his personality and attributes amount to nothing more than the worst symptoms of his condition. He is vindictive, egotistical, disconnected from reality, and dumb as rocks. None of these people currently cheering on Ye's mania from the sidelines have to live with him or take care of him. They don't have to concern themselves with where Ye—
None of the people who are cheering him on have to take care of him, have to live with him, have to watch their own fucking father deteriorate. Watch their own fucking father lose it on the public stage.
Ye goes in the middle of the night, or the consequences of his actions if things go west. They get to enjoy Ye as a hobby, a symbol,
Yeah.
a narrative.
And then his children just have to deal with it. His children just have to deal with it.
A fiction they can project onto him in whichever way makes things most interesting for them. Once the euphoria of mania stops, Ye's gonna need real friendship and real support, but in his untreated state, all he's doing is pushing the kind of people that would give him that support further and further away. I've actually got my family member back now, thanks to antipsychotic medications, and they've become my rock again. Every moment I spend with them feels precious. I can only hope that the same thing happens for that select group of people who love and care for Ye, the human, rather than Ye, the fictional concept.
So I'm just gonna say, this is such a good video. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway, like, these people aren't the family members that knew him when he was healthier, right? These people aren't, these people aren't the ones who have to watch, you know, somebody that they love not take care of themselves and spew crazy things in public, and ruin their entire life. Like lives, basically. I can tell you, anybody who's enabling him, his children are going to have very deep resentment for. People who I felt enabled my dad, when I ended up meeting them later, later on in you know, my late teens and early 20s. I think it's like early 20s or late teens or something. I don't know. When I ended up meeting them, I can tell you I was so angry. I thought I would be okay. I really thought I would be okay. But as soon as I saw them, I was so angry. I was shaking when I first met them. And that anger lasted a very long time. And it hurt me a very long time. And I can only imagine that with Kanye being the public figure that he is, that his children will be very angry for a very long time, and that will hurt them as well. I guarantee Kim and, you know, yeah, I mean, like, it's just crazy. Like, they really did, you know, I don't know. I don't even know what to say here, you know? I don't even know what to say. But, yeah, I was angry for a very long time. It took a very long time for me to no longer be angry about it. And, you know, there would be a lot of nights where I would think about how I just wanted the worst things in the world to happen to them. So. So yeah. His children are in for a lot. So is Kim. And I think it's absolutely disgusting the amount of people that tried to go at Kim and her mom for trying to get him help when he honestly did need help. And the amount of comedians that have to eat their own words now, saying that, like, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. I like Chappelle. I think a lot of people, though, don't understand. Again, like, people like Chappelle and others don't really understand how these illnesses work unless you've seen a variety of different people deteriorate several different times. It's hard to tell.